South Carolina loses to Arkansas in the first round of the SEC tournament. Season is over. Collin Murray-Boyles, is his time at South Carolina over? I tell you what, our vacation is over, and we are back. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked on Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked on Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. It has been a minute, but we are back. I'm all moved into the new place and very excited to be back. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked on Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. By the way, also on YouTube. And by the way, got some new and exciting things happening on TV as well for Locked on moving into March Madness. Now, before we get into today's episode, talking about the latest from South Carolina basketball and the season being over, remember, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. Ready for a stress-free tax season and taxes with the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. Let's get into the show. Now, I am glad, let me rephrase. It's already a bad start. I'm not glad the season's over because you much rather would have this team doing what last year's team did or the 2017 team do or what they did and go deep into the tournament or make a run or at least get some excitement in the postseason. But I think after watching 18 games of this in SEC play, we kind of knew what this was. And that's frustrating to say. And I don't want to sit here and be too, sunshine pumping or positive or overly uncritical, non-critical, whatever the correct word would be there. I don't want to necessarily do that. But after watching this for 18 games in the SEC schedule, in the toughest conference, not only in the country this year, but in the toughest conference in college basketball history, I think we'd all agree, it's kind of just an understandable ending. You just kind of knew that today was probably going to be it. Now, there were some glimmers of hope because a couple weeks ago you played this Arkansas team and you beat the brakes off of them. This version today was not that. And I don't think it's necessarily anything that South Carolina did poorly, as much as we saw this Arkansas team kind of fire at all cylinders at times. Ivicevic was not great this time out. DJ Wagner, though, is in an increased role, was fantastic. And then the kid off the bench, I think it was Adu. He was great. That Trevon Brazil kid had like 16 points and had to play 38 minutes because they only had 7 players. Here's the thing, okay? From a disappointment standpoint, it's hard for me to look at this team and be like, well, this sucks. Like, the season's over. Because, like I said, it almost feels like you're almost like at a point now where you just knew it was coming at some point. And the first postseason game was most likely going to be the last postseason game. All that being said, it's impossible to look at what happened today in that game and not be somewhat proud of the 5 to 10 young men that stepped on the floor today for South Carolina. It was a tough season. It was a step back and a regression from the season before. I think we all know from an NIL standpoint and from a not a player development, but a player resources standpoint, you were at an uphill battle. You were that's just point blank period. It was an uphill battle. Did not have the resources to go out and get a ton of players from the portal like you probably needed to compete in this year's SEC. But again, you were down 20 points in the first half to Arkansas, who is, right in that last 4 teams of the bye area for the tournament. Like, they're not they feel comfortable they're going to be in the tournament, but they're not necessarily a lock to be in the tournament. You were down by 17 at the half. You could have rolled over and died. And I don't know how many times I've said this about South Carolina athletics, whether it be with the football team in the fall, whether it be this basketball team several times this year. But that's the last thing they did. And you're down 20 points at one point in the first half. You're down 17 at the half. And all they did was claw their way back in. And at one point, they had a lead late in the second half, and they fought back. And I just think that anybody that's been on a losing team before, anybody that's been in one of the situations where it's like, there's just like, is there a point? Is like where the effort matches like the payoff at the end? And to watch those kids with very little to gain put that kind of effort, I just think that at the very least it's a lost art, for lack of better phrasing, in today's age of NIL and the transfer portal and kids being kind of like the inmates running the asylum type deal where it's like they have more power over than ever. And I just thought it was awesome to watch those kids. Now, specifically, I want to talk about a couple players that I thought were great today. It's good to see Cam Scott look pretty good. 3 of 3, 2 of 2 from 3. Ukasuk, who just is like, he's been like one of my favorite players for no reason this year because there's a stretch in late January, early February where he was pretty good from 3. It was good to see Jamari Thomas kind of go out on a high note because he was pretty bad in his last time out at the end of the regular season and on senior night. In this game, he had 16 points. He was 3 of 5 from 3. Him and Jacoby Wright were difference makers, combining for 29 points. I think they shot right around 50%. I think it ended up being like just a tad under it. But, I mean, combined, they were able to get to the basket. They were able to be good from 3. All of that paled in comparison to what Collin Murray-Boyles did. And I think that this kid, when you look at like some of the greats that have come through this program and played for this university on the men's basketball team, it's really hard not to like look at him and say and like wonder where he would sit, like on like the, it's so cliche to say, but on like the Mount Rushmore of South Carolina men's basketball players. I mean, he is one of the most talented players in the country. He got better as the year went on. Now, right now, he's a fringe lottery pick, right around like in the top 15 of the projected NBA draft. The NBA draft's not until June 25th. I will have to do some research because it's March 12th, and I'm not a huge NBA draft guy, I'll be honest. And I don't know when you have to declare. Most people assume he is on his way out. I will tell you, there's one thing that people know but aren't really talking about in terms of what could be the biggest selling point for Collin Murray-Boyles to come back. And we're going to talk about that as soon as we get out of the break. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks. Stay tuned. All right, before we get into the one potential deciding factor that could bring Collin Murray-Boyles back, I'll tell you what, that kid got better with every game. You know what didn't get better with every game? Me pronouncing his name. Because every time I get to the AY in Murray-Boyles, I develop like the thickest Southern accent. I don't know why. Collin Murray-Boyles. Anyway, before we get into that, I want to tell you real quick, it is almost tax season. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm sure you guys know all about it. Now, the one good part about tax season, if there is such a thing, is that you get to use our friends at TurboTax who do a tremendous job getting you as much money back as possible, guaranteed. Now, this is a message from our sponsor Tidal and Intuit's TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting, wondering, worrying if you were going to get any money back, then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. It's also an expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. There's no waiting, there's no wondering, and there's absolutely no worrying. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Okay, Collin Murray-Boyles. What's the one thing that could bring him back? Well, a pretty good selling point is Chloe Kitts, his girlfriend, who will still be on the women's basketball team going into next year. Listen, there's been so many people that have brought this up, and I think they've brought it up kind of in an ignorant way about Collin Murray-Boyles going into next season. If he doesn't go to the NBA, would he end up going somewhere else? Guys, how many times have we seen in the history of college sports or just college in general, someone transferring schools because of a significant other? It happens all the time. Walker Howard is one that did it from LSU to Ole Miss. There's plenty of kids. Javian Cohen, he was an offensive lineman that started for 2 straight years at Alabama in 2021, 2022, goes to Miami and to follow his girlfriend. Like, this is a tale as old as time type situation. I have zero part of me thinks that if he is not back next year, it's because he transferred someone else. Now, he's going to get offered a ton of money, and it may be in his best interest to stay. I don't know what kind of money he's going to get in the NBA. I don't know what kind of contract he's going to get in the NBA. I know he's not going to get one of those Supermax deals that it's like insane, because there is a ton of money. That's a ton of money to be made in professional basketball. Now, he's not the only player on this team that could play professionally. There's so many opportunities now, especially overseas. That has ramped up, it seems like, exponentially in the last decade, right? Year over year, especially. But he could be a professional basketball player right now. We all know that. The question is, does he want to do that? I think if you're Lamont Paris, you have to put him in a situation and sell him on the idea of, like, one, is it in your best interest? If it's in your best interest and the projection for you next year is you would be in the top 10 or top 8 or top 5, that's different. That's different money. And if you are currently a fringe lottery pick right around the 15s, because I tell you what, Collin Murray-Boyles, people are going to look at him physically, and I don't think they're going to be blown away just by his physical appearance. That's a guy that you have to put on the tape and be like, oh my God, he's everywhere. He does so many good things. He's so smart. First off, like, he's so incredibly smart on the basketball floor, like on the court. Like, he's light years. They brought it up today. Jay Billis brought it up probably 3, 4, 5 times today. And just like how good he is down low, offensively and defensively, and what he's able to do, whether it's drawing a foul, whether it's like baiting people in, whether it's just like where he is at on the court and under the rim for rebounds, like all of those things. And oh, by the way, now he's added a 3-pointer to his game, and he's been great from anywhere between like 18 feet in. Like, he's been awesome. So I think the question is, if you're Lamont Paris, the first thing you have to do is really take a look at what's in his best interest, because a lot of times, obviously, you want them to come back, but you also want what's in the best interests of your student athletes and of your players. And I don't think that is something Lamont Paris is going to be selfish about. I don't think a lot of coaches are going to be selfish about that in this day and age. You want to see your players that you recruit go have success, and that's completely understandable. Now, the other part of that is Collin Murray-Boyles is, I think, personally, I don't want to say scratching the surface, because he was so good throughout the entire season, but it's a local kid who clearly has some pride playing with that emblem on his chest, right? There's a reason why he ended up there. You look at how he ended his season, okay? You could start on against Ole Miss when he had 22 points, and then against A&M to start the month of February. He had 22-7. Then you go Ole Miss, 20-6. A couple weeks later, starting with the Texas game to close out the year. And now keep in mind, this is the most impressive part of it. At this point of the season, South Carolina was 0-13 with nothing to play for and nothing on the horizon. Collin Murray-Boyles goes for 22-10 against Texas. And then the way he closed out his season was 27-7, 35-7, 24-5. Had a off game, I'll say, against Tennessee, but then comes back and goes for 20-12 in his last game, most likely. Now, if his last game for the South Carolina Gamecocks was today, and it ended with him taking over in a 20-point, 12 rebound performance, what a way to go out. 7 of 8 from the line. Like, he was great. He was great. I do think there's something to look at this in this day and age of college athletics. It's one of the good things with NIL. I don't know how much money he's going to get in NIL. I think he's probably valuable enough to be upwards. I mean, most NIL funds for, I think, like high level SEC, which is not where South Carolina is right now, were between, I believe it was 4 and 5 million. That's where you were rumored to hearing like Kentucky, Arkansas, Alabama, those things. I don't know if South Carolina is going to make that kind of jump. Now, you also will have revenue sharing this year. And you've also heard the new AD and Lamont Paris talk about how there's going to be more of a focus and emphasis and also more available resources to South Carolina's basketball program, because what happened this year is not where they want this program to be. You never heard the words that it was like unacceptable from Lamont Paris or unacceptable from his team. And you just heard this is not where we want to be. And especially after you had so much success in his first year. Now, I don't know if he's going to get 7 figures from South Carolina, but in this day and age, there's a lot to be said where the benefits of NIL, where if you're not necessarily ready and it would benefit you more to stay in college for another year and develop physically, then by all means, you can do that while earning a ton of money that's life-changing money for you, your family, whoever else. Again, the biggest decision here is if his best interest lies in staying at South Carolina and coming back and developing for another year, and then coming back next year. And when you don't have Janai Broome, you don't have Mark Sears. I don't know if Chaz Lanier comes back from Tennessee. Wade Taylor's not going to be there. All these guys that have like kind of led the SEC in scoring. Walter Clayton's most likely gone. I don't know if Conlon's back at Florida, but you have a chance to be one of the premier players in the SEC. You already are on that, like almost on that tier, that top tier of elite player. Like, he's an elite player. I don't think he's a household name like Janai Broome, Mark Sears, and that type of thing. You have a chance to come back in this conference and be one of, if not the best player in the conference. I don't know if that's the biggest selling point for a kid that can go make millions of dollars, but we will see. And again, if it wasn't, or if it's not, and that was his last game and it was today, it sucks that it's a loss. But my God, what an incredible run that he gave us fans over the last several weeks, and especially today in Nashville. So, all right, that is all for today's episode. Very quick episode, but we are back. We are back, and I don't know if we're better than ever. I mean, who's to say? But I do know that we're back, and we will be back every day moving forward for the rest of the month. We are all settled into the new place. Very excited to be back doing this. Before we close out, I do want to tell you one quick thing about our friends at Factor. You guys have heard me talk about Factor before. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition, okay? If you are looking to optimize your nutrition, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's being calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. It's fantastic. Me and my new, I don't want to say roommate, my girlfriend, I got a bad look. We love it. We used it last year, and it's fantastic. It is no prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Remember, eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege, 50 off. The code is this: LockedOnCollege, 50 off. All one word, all capital letters. That gets you 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege, 50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege, 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, guys, we will be back tomorrow with more Locked On Gamecocks. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. We'll see y'all then.